And then taking it one step further is, what's the future will probably bring forth new genres of fiction that actually borrow from steampunk. Just like steampunk.
Certain they will.
Because this is certainly a very visually enticing kind of fiction. You know, it has very strong elements in that. So I can certainly, like this weekend was the opening of Harry Potter. And you look at all the Harry Potter movies, you see definitely, the train plays a huge part in that. Mm-hmm. You look at the castles, it goes back to the Victorian era, So, there's a lot of mechanized instruments, in that movie as well. So it certainly borrows from some of the steampunk. I don't know if J.K. Rowling borrowed those elements, or if the movies kind of incorporated.
I think the movies incorporated a lot of them. The interesting thing about steampunk and other things that might, there are definitely going to be things that borrow from steampunk, but there's some stuff that you have people who are borrowing period Victorian things are sometimes mistaken for borrowing from steampunk, just because of the fact that they're both rooted in that same period Victorian feel. That's also why I guess people have been classifying the new Sherlock Holmes movie as steampunk, and that's actually more period Victorian than anything, because that sort of stuff did actually exist in that time frame. It's not pushing it to the same levels that the steampunk would. And, alright.
And I'll say one thing. Actually, in Paris, in the subway, they've actually hired a famous artist on one station. They've designed this beautiful station that's all very steampunkish looking, if you will. It's you talk about the look. It's gorgeous. All cotton, all rivets, and beautiful blues and golds all throughout the station that this artist did. And I forget the artist's name. He's a French artist, a graphic artist, and they hired him to do this and do the conceptual design. They built it. You can go on the line in Paris subway and you'll see it. It's just stunning.
Here's an interesting question. When we're talking about the future, can you have steampunk without steam? I'm looking at, because a lot of people talk about the steampunk elements of Warehouse 13, okay, where people will talk about borrowing from that, and there is some of that until you start to look at it. The communications device, the Farnsworth, which is based on good old Philo Farnsworth, who invented the television, is actually something that's more from the late 30s, 1940s, not from the Victorian era. Artie's computer with the Remington typewriter keys instead of the keyboard, again, is closer to our time period. Only the Tesla, and you can make an argument with that, the Tesla gun is really rooted in the 19th century. Yeah. So can you have steampunk using older technology that shows up earlier than it's supposed to, but it's not rooted in Victorian technology. It's rooted in more modern technology. In other words, maybe 100 years from now, steampunk won't actually be steampunk because they will have rooted it in, well, what if these developments that took place in the 20th century actually took place later, took place earlier, that type of thing, but you don't have steam engines or anything like that. You're basing it on earlier technology that shows up sooner than it's supposed to.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting point. I think one of the key things about steampunk being part of the maker movement is kind of really what drives the technical side, the technology side of it. That found object adapting sort of things. Even Scott Westerfield's novel Leviathan. I get Leviathan and Behemoth confused sometimes because I don't remember which order they came in. He basically says that Charles Darwin developed genetics, and they have genetic science and genetic adaptation in the Victorian age. So you can definitely take that later technology and have it appearing earlier because you tweak a few pieces of information. And that's where you get the counterfactual, and that's where you get the counterfactual side of it. You can still have the steampunk be part of that.
Which is what much of Jules Verne's stuff is, very much spaceships at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, you know. So, I mean, many of his novels were focused on that. You know, it was only just a few years ago they released a new novel that he had written that never got published, you know, very much about the Paris.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you've had your hand up for a
I
while.
just have to point out the irony that this is a steampunk convention, but the only steam I've actually seen here is in the cappuccino machine. Steam is dangerous.
Years ago, I asked my father, he was an electrical engineer for the government, and working on nuclear submarines. We were talking about computer chip technology, transistor technology. And he said at the time, I said, the Russians have very similar technology to ours. He said, well, actually, there's one difference. They were very good at adapting the vacuum tube to a different type of transistor than we did. So they went in a different direction technologically wise because they couldn't get a hold of the technology of computer chips at the time. So they made incredible strides with just vacuum tube technology, to the point that, you know, the microchip, you know, using still vacuum tube technology. So it's just interesting that, yes, you know, the idea of steampunk or technology can go to so many different ways, not using steam, you know, just using electricity in a different way.
That's fair. That's a very good point. All right, in the back.
I'm not so sure that the novelists that Jules Verne talks about had anything to do with steam.
Well,
He's
no,
more.
it basically.
It's more high. It's more the. He's tied to it more less because it had direct use with steam, but it was a very mechanical. Was very mechanically operated, and one of the interesting things is you don't have to expel steam to be steam powered. The Doble cars, the later models at least, didn't have steam exhaust. They used it in the system.
Well, Jules Verne's novelist was run on, you know, condensed and nuclear power, because Nemo said, "I've harnessed the power of the sun," you know. And so when he opened up the chamber, which basically that's what's amazing about Jules Verne, he predicted most likely the nuclear submarine.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
That's true. All right. Now the web address you see up there is the one of the two websites where the video the recording that we're making right now will be archived. So for the people who came in late, you'll watch the previous sections of me standing up here talking. It'll also have a link to other sites where this will also end up being archived. So that is all for me. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to talk. I appreciate all of your input.